Democrats on the House Oversight Committee want the head of the Justice Department and the head of the FBI to answer questions under oath about their handling of the Epstein files. Robert Garcia, the top Dem on that committee, made a formal request on Tuesday. His ask comes days after former Attorney General Pam Bondi testified before that same committee and repeatedly placed blame at the feet of Todd Blanche and Kash Patel. Congressman Garcia joins us now. Congressman, it's good to see you. So tell me, what have you heard from the chairman of your committee since you sent that letter?
Well, there's been no response yet, but we certainly expect there to be one. The reality is that the former Attorney General over 30 separate times deflected to the acting AG, Todd Blanche. He basically put all of the responsibility on Todd Blanche, on redactions, on why the remainder of the files haven't been released, even on the transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell. And so it's important that we get Todd Blanche in front of our committee and Kash Patel, who is also named multiple times by the former Attorney General as an important part of the Epstein files investigation.
Well, Congressman, do you see that as deflection on her part to lay the blame at Blanche's feet? I mean, saying that he was managing, quote, the entire investigation, you know, or is that her escaping her own accountability here in your view? Or do you think she is telling you the truth, that there is something here? I mean, for a while, even survivors speculated in conversations with me and my colleagues that they thought Blanche was leading the way. He's the one who traveled down to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell in the first place.
Yeah, I think both are true. Look, I think there's no question, first of all, that Pam Bondi deflected and tried to play cover for President Trump. Look, I actually asked Pam Bondi on multiple occasions, and on 5 separate times, she refused to answer my questions. I was right across from her about President Trump, about what he knew, if he directed any of the redactions, about why he was removed from the Epstein files early on and then placed back in. And so she wouldn't answer those questions. And multiple times, her attorney, who was actually from the Department of Justice, which is pretty rare, turned to her to stop her from not answering questions about the president. So that was pretty stunning. And at the same time, she kept deflecting and deflecting to Todd Blanche. And so when she didn't want to answer a question, she'd say, well, you got to ask Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche was in charge of everything. So she both played cover for the president, but also clearly put the responsibility on Todd Blanche. And so if that's going to be her posture, then we need the acting AG in front of us, and James Comer has got to agree to bring him in. No one can answer the question, why was Ghislaine Maxwell transferred to a less secure prison? Pam Bondi couldn't answer it, and it's time for Todd Blanche to answer that question.
Well, you mentioned the questions, the concerns around all these redactions. And there's this one 2009 email that's been the subject of a lot of discussion in recent days. And I want to play this sound of Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, who talked about that 2009 email that had the subject line Trump. Take a listen.
I took a look at this email from Jack Goldberger, Wednesday, October 14th, 2009. The subject is Trump. It is to Jeffrey Epstein. J.E. never expelled from Mar-a-Lago. No, he was not a member. May have been a guest. Never asked to leave.
The reason why that was redacted is because that's a privileged communication between counsels.
First, Congressman, do you buy his response to your colleague, Congresswoman Dean, there? And then also, do you see conflicting statements on that email coming from this administration?
First of all, let's be really clear. There are over 3 million documents and files, 3 million, that have not yet been released to the public, and Pam Bondi confirmed that. And as it relates to these redactions, and specifically the one that you're speaking about, absolutely, it's concerning. These communications should not be redacted. All of these files should be made public. And the subpoena that's in place for these documents does not allow for these redactions. There's no question that whether it was Todd Blanche or Pam Bondi or anyone else, there is a White House cover-up in trying to protect the president, Mar-a-Lago, and who was involved as co-conspirators in the Epstein files. And so we cannot take Todd Blanche's word. We need to actually see all of the files, and we're demanding for them to be continued to be released. There's no question. There's all sorts of stories about Mar-a-Lago. We know that Mar-a-Lago was a place where Jeffrey Epstein was recruiting women who were then later abused. Well, what did Donald Trump know? There's conflicting right now statements by DOJ officials about what's actually in those files and why they were redacted.
Congressman, before we go, can I ask you quickly if you have names of other people who you want to testify under oath soon?
I mean, we do. Look, I think first we want to talk to Alex Acosta again under oath. That's going to be critical for our investigation. And then there's numerous associates that worked with Jeffrey Epstein, that worked on the grounds, whether it was on the island or whether it was in New York or in Palm Beach, that we want to speak to as well. But we have some important interviews coming up in the next few weeks that are folks that we want to talk to, that I have information. So a lot of subpoenas in the future. But right now, we need Todd Blanche and Kash Patel in front of the committee.
All right, Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you. As always, I'm sure I'll be asking to talk to you again soon about some of those other names.